Welcome, everyone. I'm Allan Palmer in my apartment and tea room. Garando. So many interesting things have seem always to have happened when I prepare for these lectures. Lecture, I found out, means reading. Well, I'll be doing a little reading, but it's mostly talking. Shintō is what shall I say about its place in Japanese culture? Shinto existed long before Buddhism came in the 600s. That seems like long ago. My earlier studies were Greece and Rome, ancient Greece and Rome, 500, 400 BC. They're still there. Japan did not focus on stone buildings, wood, and wood doesn't last. Ise Jingu, which is the terrestrial home of Amaterasu Omikami, the heaven brightener, the sun goddess. The imperial line is descended from Amaterasu, maybe. Very complicated ancient history. One of the most important events in the history of Japan is recorded in this book, which is called the Nihongi. Nihon, Japan, Gi, record, probably. This is by W.G. Watson, and it's Chronicles of Japan from the earliest times to AD 697. Before 697. There's a lot of Korean influence. And maybe one of the most important Korean influences may be illustrated here. This is an illustration of a goddess dancing before a cave, maybe. And that is Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, the turning of the heavens. Amaterasu had hidden herself in the cave of heaven, the Ame no Iwato, and sealed the entrance with a great big stone. Sound familiar? I think I've mentioned something about this before, but all the gods assembled, the 80 myriad of gods assembled to try to figure how to get her out. And Ame no Uzume no Mikoto got up on a drum and revealed her personal self, danced, and everybody laughed. Amaterasu sent her grandson Ninigi to sort of quiet things down in what was to become Japan. And she sent her grandson, I know there's a lot of names, this takes a long time, from early times. And there was some unrest, so Amaterasu thought it would be a good thing if Ame no Uzume went with him. And they came to the crossroads, and there was probably an Ainu. He's red, big nose, Sarutahiko. She revealed herself, and their offspring were the leaders of sericulture, weaving, all of the life necessities were begun by their children, Uzume and Saruta. Saruta is monkey, rice field, saru. And saru, the kanji for kami, Shintō is God, way, path, something you go along with. And the kanji for kami is to show and monkey. Their music is called sarugaku. So I will touch on those things as we go through. I wanted, for the last few days, wanted to change the whole thing because I've been making discoveries that have altered my thinking from the get-go. If I start on it, it may not happen. So perhaps we should get started on it and it will appear in the talk. Buddhism, Shinto, Christianity, religion of any sort or name is a part of Japanese life. Hōunsai Daisosho, his beloved wife, Tomiko-sama, when she was a child, she had tuberculosis and she went into a Christian hospital and was attended to by the nuns, a Catholic hospital. And Tomiko-sama became a Christian. She's also a Buddhist. She also follows Shintoism. Sounds strange, Shintoism. So these things all fit together. One doesn't really stand out more than the other. There's a kind of basic difference between Buddhism and Shinto. Shinto was not really called anything. It was just the faith of the people. And then when Buddhism came in from the continent, they had to distinguish it from Buddhism. So they called it Shinto, Kami no Michi. That is so complicated, and things are complicated enough. But there are two essential aspects that separate Buddhism and Shinto, but in theory, not in actuality. And is that Buddhism deals with life leading to death and what's going to happen to you, death. So quite often there are Buddhist funerals. Very seldom, at least in modern Japan, very few Shinto funerals. Shinto deals with life, the importance of every living thing. There was a time when Buddhism and Shintoism came together. It's exceedingly complicated. However, Buddhism, you go inside the sacred place. In Shinto, you stay outside where the kami resides. You have to do some studying yourself. So let me try to continue on. And our first image is a chawan. And this was given to me. I was sort of the gaido-san for a group of Americans, Bostonians primarily, who came to visit while I was living in Japan. And I was sort of their guide, a little bit of a guide. And at the end of their tour, they gave me this bowl. And this has been copied many, many times for each year. This was made for the Year of the Dog several years ago. Let me make sure. Sorry, not the dog, the chicken, the rooster, the cock. People have, right. So the year, Torii Doshi. And on the decoration on it, if you turn the bowl counterclockwise, you start at the first month, and these are the old lunar names for the months, the moons, we should say. Mutsuki, Kisaragi, Yayoi, Uzuki, Satsuki, Minazuki. Minazuki is an interesting one. No water. Well, it occurs in June, because lunar months are a month later than the solar months. Well, the month with no water is during the rainy season. Well, no, the rainy season is finished and a dry season begins. And that's when Minazuki made sense. Fumizuki, when you write letters to the gods, Altair and Vega, the cow puncher, and the princess, daughter of the king in China, and they cross the bridge of heaven, which of course doesn't exist. The stars don't move. And it's all in a concept. And they can meet only once a year. They were too busy with each other. And the king said, only one night a year. And so everybody hopes that they will have cloudy weather so they can meet in privacy. That's when you write poetry on long strips called tanzaku, put them on bamboo. That really is on the 7th night. And in 7 days will be the eve of Obon, when families welcome back departed spirits. So those bamboo stalks, they use for cleaning the place. And originally, they would tie paper streamers onto the bamboo and then flail around that. I saw some wonderful pictures of really long bamboo, sasa, which has narrow stalk, with these pieces of paper. And they were flogging the intricacies of the architecture in order to get the dust and the spider webs away. So that's the origin of those tanzaku, not poems to the beloveds. And then Hazuki, Nagatsuki, the long moon, tea house of the August moon. I talked about that the last time. It's actually occurs in September. And then Kaminazuki, no gods. Well, they all went to Izumo for a gathering, except for 2 of them, Daikoku and Ebisu. And they're the chief deities outside of Amaterasu's brother, Susanoo no Mikoto. He was the naughty boy that caused his older sister to go hiding in the heavens. There's some rather strange things that he did. He broke down the barriers of earth so that the flooded rice fields would drain. Shimotsuki, frost, and Shiwasu is the 12th moon. They have something to do with rice growing. They have something to do with the 12 animals. It is so incredibly complicated, but a wonderful tea bowl. And moving on to, that was just a sort of introduction. And our next is in the Machiai. And there's Dharma. I was having a tense pause there to see if you could get his name before I came up with it. And Ame no Uzume no Mikoto as a Hime Dharma, Princess Dharma. This is so curious to me, and I only fairly recently figured this out, that he is sort of a quintessential Buddhist, Zen primarily, and she is a quintessential Shintō deity as Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, the revolving of heaven. Absolutely charming. And it says, get up. And onto a fan, lots of fans. Fans are so important to Buddhist culture and life. This was given to me by the abbot of the, now I have to organize my brain to come out with this. This is from a shrine in Kyushu that's called Dazaifu, Hachimangu. Hachiman was the god of war. And the priest, the head priest, originally, yes, sorry, this is a little complex. Sugawara Michizane was deified as Hachiman, and his principal shrine is in Kitano Tenmangu in Kyoto. And there was a time when Michizane was banished, and he was banished to Dazaifu in Kyushu. And a whole complex, marvelous complex, dedicated to Michizane in Dazaifu. And the young, this is a few years ago, so he's a little older, Nishi Takatsuji is his name. And he gave me this fan as a remembrance. I have no idea what it says. I can pick out a few characters, but perhaps the most obvious thing is the ume no hana, the plum blossom. The plum tree in Kitano missed Michizane and flew to Kyushu. Now, our next fan, we may never get through this, ladies and gentlemen. That's a fan, a sensu, on its side, and it measures 7 sun kane. Yes and no. You see where the paper is? About halfway. Well, that isn't halfway. That is Sanzonibu Kanejaku. That's the Kanejaku at the bottom there. And it's Sanzonibu Kujira at the paper. So the paper part and the bamboo part relate to each other 8 to 10. I just learned about this in the last week. I have been measuring the whole thing, and if it was 8 or 10, I thought that was pretty interesting. It never occurred to me until recently to measure the 2 parts that relate 8 to 10. You can mull on that for a while. And now, wonderful image of a wonderful piece done by Shunyo, Yahagi Shunyo. She was visiting Boston a number of years ago, and there was a big gala at the Boston Children's Museum. And there were lots of Japanese entertainments going on, including calligraphy. And Shunyo-san is a renowned calligrapher. And she wrote this for a friend, and he gave it to me. I will read it. It is Uchu Mao Issei. Heaven, sky, turns, majestic nature. Uchu Mao Issei. Heaven, sky, turns, majestic nature. Essentially my translation. But this is Mao, this is dancing, but it's a different Mao, a different dance from Odori. Odori is different, just like a foxtrot and a waltz are different. And Mao is no, and sometimes seen in kabuki, but Odori is, I want to say, freer. In Mao, it's essentially leaving your feet on the floor and moving along, sort of sometimes in the way that we enter the tea room, move around the tea room. That's Mao, moving forward, but turning, and they're stomping. And now in the tobacco bone, we're still in the machiai, going to the tobacco bone. I thought it would be good to introduce some thoughts, my thoughts about incense. I've been studying a little bit of the Shino school of incense. And the preparation of the ash looks a little similar. I've mentioned this before. And I was a little puzzled of how to sort of join the two together, tea and incense and Shinto. The old gods, the old Shinto kami, they don't like incense. How about that? Incense is not usually a part of Shinto. Very, very Buddhist. But there was a very important tea character, Furuta Oribe. He was one might say, a disciple, a deshi, a follower of Senno Rikyu. I don't know that they got along very well, because there are stories about Rikyu saying things about Oribe that may not be wholly complementary. But Oribe changed the quiet, somber, restrained aspects of Rikyu's tea. Who could compete with that? Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael, those two were nice, at least for me, a little bit comparison. Yeah, so that hiire is in the Oribe style. And it's certainly not Rikyu. It's got a wonderful little picture of two men pulling a boat, and I've got to move along here. So we'll see something. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and introduce one of my favorite images, and I'll try not to go on and on about it, but this is one of the rare, rare images of Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. I was with a group of friends in Japan, in the house where I was living at the time, and we were enjoying ourselves, and somebody came out with this. And I got quite excited about it. Not for obvious reasons, perhaps. But I knew instantly that it was Ame no Uzume no Mikoto trying to entertain the gods. But she is a goddess of fertility. Censorship in Japan is a little different from censorship in America, we might say, but not so much now, I think. This figure is standing right over here. And here she is. Absolutely monumental, but in a very tiny form. One of my great treasures. I carried on so that Len Nuvoloni said, perhaps you should have it. I will give it to you. Moving on to a postcard that was given at a shrine in Kyoto. I have to be a little careful because this is emotional stuff for me. This is Ota Jinja, a scene at Ota Jinja. And there are musicians and a dancer. The dancer at the left is holding the suzu. And she will shake that, twist it, long ribbons hanging from it. Next to her, seated with cymbals, is a lady of advanced years. And at night, after the sun goes down, this is performed on the 10th of every month so that the sun will come up again. The dancer is representing Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, hoping to get Amaterasu out of the cave of heaven. So there are a couple of candles, very dark. The shrine is constructed in such a way as if there were a mirror from where the photographer is standing, there would be an identical structure. This is almost all of the structure. And the votaries would be sitting on camp stools set up right between the two of them. It's very small. And then Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, her spirit is enshrined in the building, which is to our left from the picture. So in this quiet light, this lady, seated lady, would, in my mind, vanish. The drummer holding a tsutsumi on his shoulder and hitting it. And then next to him, on the right, is kind of the village elder. He's sort of the head man of that neighborhood. And he beats a drum, taiko, which is on the floor, and he hits it with a stick. Forgive my interpretation. He would announce the prayer and then hit the drum, and a tonk and a clash and a shiver of the bells. Chunk, 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 chunk. That's it. Dancers, performers, especially Geiko and Maiko and Geisha, come to worship at the shrine of Ame no Uzume no Mikoto so that they will be better in their dance. 5-color curtain in the back, rice straw garlands defining the sacred space, the shimenawa, with little papers hanging from it. This shrine has had a long history and is famous for a field, a pond of irises that has been there since before the place was, that Kyoto was the capital. This is near Kamigamo Jinja. And moving on to, again, another tiny toy, not really a toy, protector. This is a miniature version of the great, very imposing gate at in the ocean at the shrine of Itsukushima on the island of Miyajima, the palace, the shrine island. You get there by boat, so you feel sort of remote along with the thousands of other people, but at night it gets kind of quiet. I have a video, and but we will come back to this the Torii, the chicken roost. They must have some very large chickens. The first animal that is born in the Japanese belief, the Asian belief, I should say, is the chicken. And the chicken is the familiar to Amaterasu Omikami because they herald the dawn, the rising of the sun. So we'll get back to this in a little bit. This is a souvenir from one of the quite a few souvenir shops at Miyajima. You should go there if you've never been. It is a magical place, as is Ise. But moving on to holidays, again, we'll go back and forth to holidays. And this is called a buri buri kogo. Buri buri means that it's sort of plumped up. And that slot is where a handle would go. Now, this was created as a kogo. This was never meant to be one of the mallet heads for the game, which is sort of a little bit like croquet. and it's decorated, as the box says, Hongkin, real gold. And from my photograph, we can't quite see the magical cast of Uba, the old woman, and Joe, the old man. They're on opposite sides. But it's filled with Shintō decorations. There's the great pine tree. This scene takes place at Takasago, high sand. Probably, well, I don't know, high sand. There's a tortoise hidden away there and a crane, all very auspicious signs. These, let's call it a gicho, we might, they are used after the celebrations of the new year. 3 of these mallets, the stick and the mallet head, make a tripod, and the expendable decorations are piled on and they set it on fire. Well, these mallet heads don't burn completely, so they're taken home and put into the row for the first tea then. And these 3 booties, gicho, are the shtabi. Smaller, yes. The fabric, gorgeous, was a gift from to the people who attended when Zabosai Iemoto became Waka Sojo. And this was a major event of him doing tea in a very large way at Heian Jingu, which is a reproduction, a recreation of the imperial palace from the Heian period. It's not located where the palace used to be. It's, well, in a park on the east side of town. It's very Chinese. It's very orange-red, vermilion, cinnabar. And this fabric is about the size of a fukusa. It's a dashi buksa, and it has Buddhist treasures, which of course are shared by Shintō. Ravishing, ravishing. Tea is not all somber and quiet, visually quiet. Some bright ume blossoms there, and there's another ume that in person you can see it. There's another tree that's white. And yes, the kogo, the buri kogo that we use, is wood. It's lacquered on the inside. And so it's the time for neriko, but neriko is wet. So the neriko is put on a cut leaf, a camellia leaf. This again is tiny. It's 25 bu, teeny tiny, the incense. And you cut the tips off of the camellia. This is camellia. Camellia is the, as its character says, is the flower of spring. Camellias start blooming in November-ish and continue all through the winter and into spring, what we would call spring. And a fukusa, this is was made for the year 1987, the year of the hare, and there they are, 2 of them, with enormous ears flying above, well, in front of the moon, and wonderful, wonderful waves. This was a design of Sentomiko-sama. And this, again, was for 1987. Toshi. The Asians especially the Japanese, I shouldn't say that, I'm sure the Chinese do as well, see a rabbit making mochi on the moon under a katsura tree. And since there's a rabbit on the moon and the moon has power over the sea, that's why you may see hares flying over waves, because they can cause the waves and the tides. Absolutely charming. Long ears. Now hear this. I avoid saying rabbits because hares are different. They are wild, and bunnies can be rather quiet. Now we'll show a video which I took, and I have to apologize for it because I didn't know what I was doing. I had just gotten a camera, and I'm not very good with cameras. And here we are at Itsukushima Jinja. That was the ticket office. It's built on sand, yes, but it's high tide. And it's been there for quite some time. It's dedicated to 3 deities, 3 ladies of the sea, goddesses of the sea. And it's been there a very long time, hundreds of years. And as I said earlier, you get there by boat, ferry, together with lots of other people. And if we could pause for a moment, there's going to be a signal, but beyond there, you can see just to the left of the middle is a pagoda, a Sanju no To. So there's a Buddhist temple up there. Daisho-in and Iamoto of Urasenke and other schools present tea there. It's dedicated to any number of deities, but a particularly favorite deity is Jizo. And I went there to get a special blessing from Jizo. Lots of stairs. Japan is very hilly. They would like to, and I agree in part, that it is mountainous. There's not much flat land. So moving on over the sea, that's a hotel there, that bright white building. And there in the sea is the great, the wonderful, the symbol of Japan really is the Torii. The Torii seems to be ancient, but in fact, it really isn't that old. And it was reconstructed later on. Let me get to my notes here. I'll do a little lecturing. I'll do a little reading. It was founded in the first year of the reign of Empress Suiko. That is so important because it's a woman, an empress, who founded this shrine in 593. Obviously, it's been changed over the years. And the Torii was first built in 1546. So it's 1,000 years-ish after. Maybe it was, I never thought about this before. Maybe it was for the 1,000th year anniversary that they built it. It's been, because it's in the sea and there are typhoons, the last restoration was in fact this year, 2020. I don't know whether that actually happened or not. But it was rebuilt the last time, was 1875. When I was first there in 1970, touring Japan, I swim and I swam through the gate to bless me. I've quite a few tales, but we should move on. And having seen the video, when you go to a tea, you should bring some money. And that seems crass, but you wouldn't go to a restaurant and expect them to foot the bill. You pay for it, and it's called mizuya mimai, to sort of cover the cost of things in the mizuya. That's the preparation room, the water house. And these are some samples of paper envelopes that you would wrap your bills in, not your coinage. No coinage, please. And this can be very complicated because of your status in society kind of causes you to have a certain amount of money that you're giving rather than somebody who works for you and so forth. So the one on the left, that's quite good with a kotobuki, long life. And the Noshigami, this can be called a Noshigami, but the Noshigami is actually that six-sided folded piece of paper there. That's actually the Noshigami. And if we look over, you can see it more readily on the, that's just an envelope, which is fine. The other is a large piece of nice paper folded up. And there's nice paper on that envelope, but you can see that the mizuhiki are printed rather than actual thread, paper threads, mizuhiki. That's a whole story unto itself. But that Noshigami there on the one in the middle, the actual noshi are those little yellow things poking up in that red square, the red square. It's pulled awabi, dried and pulled awabi. That's the gift. You would give somebody a large piece of awabi, which they would use, the recipient would use to make stock, dashi. That's the gift, that's the noshi. Stretched awabi. Surprise. And then that charming piece, I call it charming, little envelope with a folded up bill. You should, as best you can, give unfolded, unused bills, not old, wrinkly, treasured ones. They should be new. But the person who gave this one didn't. And they are the Shichifukujin, the seven fortune gods. And starting at the left, I have to zoom in on mine to make sure that I get it right, is Hote, Jurojin, sorry, Fukurokuju, Jurojin, and Benten. Benten-sama, she's the one in the middle, the only lady. That's a long story. And then Bishamonten, and then Daikoku, and then lastly, Ebisu. Ebisu. Ebisu is the only Japanese god in the group. He has a rather complicated history, of course. Ebisu was the first child of of Izanami and Izanagi. I always tried to remember how to remember who was the female and who was the male. Gi, Izanagi, sounds like the French Guy, guy. So that's how I remember that. And Mimi, La Boheme, the girl. So they met, these are the primal deities of Japan. They met, enjoyed each other's company, and their first child was, who turns out to be Ebisu. And until the age of 3, he still could not walk. So they put him in a boat made of camphor wood and set him adrift on the river of heaven. So he became the god of fishermen, and he's often seen holding a fish. And I think I had this before. Here's a little image of Ebisu, and he's holding a fish, a tai, a red tai. He's sort of odd looking because he was in a fire, a sacred fire. And people would gather these up after the fire and take them home so that they would protect their home against fire. So here's Ebisu, often cross-legged, and he's got a hat, a cap, that usually would stand up, but his has flopped over. These are light motifs. And his buddy, Daikoku, here's Daikoku. And Daikoku, again, he's from a fire. He's standing on 2 bales of rice. He's got a hammer. And he is the Indian god. Suddenly my mind went completely blank. The great black. He is a phallic deity. You need to have fertile fields. You need to have blessings to have good crops. And from his hammer, Daikoku's hammer, we get great treasures. He also has a big bag of goodies in his bag. But Daikoku. Daikoku is also read Oguro. And Rikyu worked with Chojiro on the creation of what later became known as Raku, Jawan, Raku, that one of the black bowls, Rikyu gave the name Oguro. It's quite small, in fact, quite small. One might think it's gigantic and imposing, but no. And now into the tea room, and we'll take a look at the tokonoma. And there's Ebisu. I know some of you are probably thinking about a song from the 50s, maybe. And these are masks. The Jiku has painting and of masks of Ebisu, and not Otafuku or Uzume. This is Fuku Musume. She's the fortune maiden, and she sells and gives away, but prominently sells ornaments and masks and treasures at festivals for Ebisu, which occurs on the 10th of the month. But we'll look into that a little bit more later on. And the flowers, very small Hanaide, and I put it on a sanbo, and we'll look into that a little bit. And the kogo is a monkey on, in fact, paper envelopes that people gave me with money inside, thank you very much, which I gathered together and made into a kamikamashiki, which is more important to me than just some very nice paper bought at a store. So let's take a little bit closer look at the jiku, kakemono. I don't know, well, I can read what might be called the signature, which is Hazuki, and the stamp says Hazuki leaf moon. That's where an artist would have signed it. And there's a poem, perhaps, on the other side, which begins Furo Goromi, Gomori, sorry, Fuyu Gomori, which means winter hibernation. And the rest of it is a complete mystery. I've had a number of Japanese people look at it and they can't figure it out either. Charming. We know it's Ebisu because of his hat. That bent over, wind-blown hat. Usually it stands up, if you know anything about, or something about Japanese art, and that men often wear hats that are quite high and arched. And but his is soft and it has gotten blown over in the wind. So moving on to the Hanaide. The Hanaide looks to me, and probably is meant to be, a cone of sand in front of a Shintō shrine. Their origin, which is long ago, we still don't, they're not absolutely certain what they mean. They come in pairs, and they can be small as this is. This is only a few inches high. It was made by Ando Takumi, a somewhat celebrated potter. There are many potters in Japan, and to have some fame is already remarkable. I kind of like the mirror image of it in the black lacquer there. Also, mirror image on the bottom, the base of it. It's way too small for a Hanaide, except in my house. And because it looks like tate suna, standing sand. I say they are not quite sure. Kamigamo Jinja, where perhaps some of the most famous of these sand cones are located, they believe that they are two sacred mountains in the area, and they certainly could be. But there are these sand cones in Buddhist temples at Daikoku, at smaller shrines, little tiny sand mounds. They're absolutely enchanting. What are they? Some of them have pine needles poked into the top of them. One of them has two, one of them has three, so that you have male and female. I've yet to figure out which one is which. And now on the sambo, because they are related to Shintoism, and here it is on a sambo, and the sambo itself, three treasures or three directions. There's a hole on that hole that we see in the center. And if you look carefully, you can see the same stitching, but on the inside of the opposite side of the stand. So the tray has the seam in front. Now the rule in tea is for the tojime, for the seam, is marumai and kaku muko. Well, this is muko, but it's in front. That is because it's not for us, it's for deity, and deity is on the other side. You're giving this to the deity. So from the deity's point of view, this is kaku muko. This is kaku, cornered. 8 corners, infinity in space, and the seam, the tojime, on the other side of the base. You can see it right in the through the window of the opening. So that solves that problem, I hope, at least for those of you watching. The shinde, going on to the shinde, the bells. I've got my bells, and modest pair, some of the modest piece, they can be quite elaborate and often shiny. They're shiny when they're new. And with a long, this has red and white with some knots in it. And you don't shake it this way, you shake it this way over the head of the person who wants to be blessed. And there are 10 bells, almost like jingle bells. These are exceedingly complicated. Can't get too close there. Right, there's a top and a bottom. Our jingle bells are a solid piece, but these are fitted together with a small opening in the bottom and something to clunk around in the bottom of it. And each one of these is called a suzu. And the river that flows through Ise Jingu is called the Isuzugawa, which is 50 bells. No one seems to know what that means. But 50 is also 5. You have to have an imagination sometimes. And there are 5 bells here. This is not unique. And there are 5 bells on the top. So maybe they have something to do with the river. Blessing. The river, people, when they arrive at Ise Jingu, there are 2, the Naigu and the Gegu, the inside one and the outside one. And before you enter the one where Amaterasu is living, when she's here on Earth, the Isuzagawa flows by there, and you stop along the river's side, and you scoop up water and sip it, spit it out, and clean your hands. And that's one of the sources for rinsing your hands at the chozubachi in the garden. This is another sambo. Because it's lacquer, makes me think that it might be used in a Buddhist service. I showed this before, and the sort of familiar fuchidaka with the sweets, the stack of boxes with a lid, that lid fits exactly on that, exactly. Now, the Torii, going to take a little glimpse at Torii, and this, again, a little tiny one, but exceedingly important to me. This is right here. Right here. Monumental, isn't it? Yes, it is. This is a gate, a torii, to an Inari Shrine. Though there are foxes. Foxes are associated with Inari, and Inari is a shrine that is dedicated to the rice god. Well, I was visiting Michael and Christy in San Francisco, and Michael was going to go to New York. Christy was staying in San Francisco at Urasenke. She is Urasenke in San Francisco. So our foxes are, for me, Michael and Christy. And now a view of the tea room from sort of this perspective. Fukuro Dana, the row. I have a kama that's used usually in Urasenke in the 4th month. And we'll take a glimpse of the kama a little bit later. But I wanted to have it for this presentation for a number of reasons. On the top of the tana, this tana, the Fukuro Dana, which is bag, doesn't make much sense, really. You have to sort of know more about nomenclature. And it's based on a much, much earlier stand for incense utensils created by the first master of Shintō, school of incense. Shintō is the same name as the ceramic ware, the Shintō, but different persons. Well, this is so complicated, was, until I measured it, the tana, it's called a tana, Fukuro Dana. It's based primarily, I said, on the Shintō Dana, but the staggered shells, which are Chigai Dana, different shells, what's that all about? Well, it seems that the first, in Japan, the first staggered shells are in the Dojin Sai Yojo-han room of the Togudo in Genkakuji. There's the shoin, which is the desk, and the round window. And then to the left of that are two staggered shelves and a cabinet at the bottom and at the top. Those were the first, supposedly, as far as they know, Japan knows, were the first staggered shelves. So the Shino master created this stand and in fact puts it into an area rather like the tokonoma. Where Rikyu is, peeking through the bars there, the pillars. Next to him, that cabinet goes all the way across. I could, if I were an incense person, I guess, put it up on that shelf. But Rikyu took it and brought it into the tea room. It can only be used with the ro because there's no logical place for the furo. So it's used in the ro season. Yes. I was measuring it, well, those of you who know me know that I measure everything, and I was measuring away using the kanejaku. And I came up with a whole bunch of ideas about why it was that measurement. 25 had a lot to do with the number 25. Well, there are 25 bodhisattvas that accompany Amida to get you in your spirit, hopefully. Well, it isn't that at all. It's measured with the Kujira Jaku, just like the Gyo Daisu. It's two shaku Kujira across the front and one shaku Kujira back, plus 5 bu. And those posts, including it's actually a wall more than a post, right in the middle, that's go bu. So it's a shaku kujira on either side of that go bu. And there's a shaku plus go bu on its depth. I'm not making this up. Oh, yes, we'll get to it. I think we'll get to it. So let's move along to the kama. And the kama is a Tsukigigama. And it is rather in the manner of the furo that originally the kama rested on flanges not this big, unless it was a rice cooker. And because you don't want to rest it on the foundation, the rodan, you don't want to rest it on that, so little blocks of wood. And different masters have different blocks, different woods for those blocks. But perhaps you can see the surface is covered with matsuba, pine needles. So that's shiki matsuba. This kama is called a shiki gama. The shiki is, pass wood. The blocks allow a gap to be between the flange and the rodan, so the air can come in to it. So shiki gama and shiki matsuba, wordplay, obviously wordplay. These lugs, the kansuki, those are Toyama, distant mountain. But look at the tsumami, the knob on top of the kama, the lid. It's in the form of a kiku, and kiku is the flower, but kiku also is the word for listening to incense. But listening in tea is for the pine wind, matsukaze. So the pine needles, you listen to it with the kama purring. I've never used that word before in conjunction. We're listening to it because of the kiku, tsumami. And little blocks of wood and the shaku, that's kanejaku. So the nearest ones are cherry wood And therefore furo. And then our sugi, oh, that's cherry, sakura, that wood. And then there's sugi. Rikyū used magnolia. That came as a big shock to me recently. I learned that he used magnolia wood. Magnolia bark is used in medicine, Chinese medicine. And then the final, or the tsukigigama on the right is fairly much standard. And they are not square, they're slightly rectangular. The sugi ones are half the height of the cherry ones, just a matter of choice. And a glimpse at the tana, the fukuro dana. I was taking a picture of the tana itself, and not, I should have been, but I wasn't thinking about Rikyū, but he's got an eye out on his tana. So, and that is the shaku on the floor. That's the kujita jaku, minus half of the gobu. And this knob, and perhaps you can understand that's a door, you lift it up to get it out and put things inside. And if you have one, and if you have been using it, you cannot open the door when there's dogu in front. And I'm beginning to think that maybe the dogu, chawan, and the chaki, and later the chasen, they might go in front of the Mizusashi, rather like furo. Even, I know it's ro, but the door is in the way. Well, you can open the door before you put the dogu down. Absolutely beautiful thing. This all collapses. It's not permanent. It's so cleverly done with hinges. The posts, yes, they come off. And the shelf on the right, because this is so strange. If you've never seen it before, it looks really strange. It's as though you have two tana set side by side. The right side looks very familiar, and the left side looks like the Miki Machi Dana, but upside down. I have seen pictures of the Miki Machi Dana with the shelf on the bottom. Why not? Why not? So our next is the Mizusashi standard Seto Shitoeguchi. Absolutely beautiful. And then the Natsume. The Natsume is an incredible treasure. This beautifully, beautifully made, ravishing lacquer, and the inside is lacquered as well. The scene is at Sumiyoshi Jinja, which is part of Osaka, and the shrine dedicated to the sea people, mariners, was founded in 211 by Empress Jingu. Empress, another lady. And three gods, this seems to run in the family there, three gods of the sea are revered, including Emperor Ojin. He becomes Hachiman. And the Usacha is Oimatsu, old pine. And then our kogo, we have two kogos, why not? And this one is made for the year of the monkey, Sarudoshi, and he's holding the Shin en Rei, the God Garden bells. He looks like he's having a good time. Practically comic book, but he's so sweet. Why not have a little fun? Sarugaku. That's one of the reasons why. Oh, that hat, you can't quite tell from this angle, but that's the hat that the wind has blown over to the side on Ebisu. And moving on to the Haboki, which is an owl. The owl in Japanese is Fukuro, so I have it because it rhymes with the Fukuro Dana, and Otafuku is the later manifestation of Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, incense. Incense is presented on this naga bone, comes directly from incense. Incense is at least 500 years older than Chanoyu as we know it. And so on the left is the kiki goro. Kiki means listen, not chrysanthemum. However, those little lines on the top might be mistaken for chrysanthemum petals, but I don't think so. And the burning charcoal is embedded in the ash. You don't need to have the charcoal exposed because you're not lighting your tobacco in your pipe. And on the right, somewhat challenging to see, is the kasane kogo, 3 levels. The top one holds the incense in a wrapper. The second one holds a mica square. And when you're finished, the piece can be, the mica with the incense on it can be put in the bottom one, which is lined with silver. Kobashi, to handle the incense, blackened bamboo. You should get blunt ends. Sometimes they're pyramidal and they are more challenging to hold the teeny tiny piece of incense. And the ginyo basami, the tongs to pick up the incense, sorry, the mica square, which is called ginyo, silver leaf. And just a glimpse of the tools that come from incense with a gold wrapper. You see that the wrapper, that's obviously the folded paper on the right lined in gold, and these are tools that are used in preparing the hiide, the kikigoro, for incense appreciation. They use a spoon, that's the little, spoon on the far right, and then a dagger, a spear pointed at both ends. That's called an uguis, and the folded pieces of paper that held the incense are plunged onto that spike, which is driven into the tatami, so that you can keep the papers in order. They do blow around. And just a glimpse of the wrappers. The incense, I photographed this on the tatami so that you can see that this is quite a tiny piece of incense. The ginyo there, almost the size of a tatami weave, and the wrapper for the piece of incense. And then there is incense that was brought to me. This is the purple wrapper. The purple wrapper has Dragon Valley incense, and this is stick incense, senko, stick incense. And this was a gift from Anthony Crasso, our director and producer, and all around do everything person, introducing. He got this incense at Higashi Honganji. Higashi Honganji. So this is an incense wrapper. It's rather like the gold paper wrapper, but this is just smaller. And then the black wrapper is for tobacco, and this would go on the tobacco bone. So the tobacco is rather like incense. I used to smoke, but that's another story. It's not really incense. And if you give a gift of incense, you might want to put it in an envelope, such as this ravishing thing. You wouldn't hand it just like that. You would wrap a piece of paper around it, and with noshi on it, that would be the Noshigami. That's in lieu of gift wrapping. But this is 3 pieces of really very fine paper, folded 11 times to get this incredible design. And it's diagonal, whereas the others was folded sort of rectilinearly. And then just a little glimpse at the kikigoro, which was made by Makoto Yabe for the 10th anniversary of the incense group that gathers here in Boston. And now we can see the Oribe Hiide. It's got a few nicks in it, probably people lighting their pipes, not me, and two peasants wearing raincoats, pulling a boat that's invisible. We don't see the boat on the other side. And just glimpses of the Chadogu, the Chaide, resembles a daikai, but this was made by Marie Z. Chino in the Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico. She restarted pottery done by the natives there. She was born in 07 and she died in 82, but a monumental figure in Native American ceramics. This is very typical of her work. And it's quite in harmony with that Japanese fabric modeled on a Chinese fabric that is Itoya Futsu. And because my studio is somewhat limited, if we put the white daikai, that lid comes from a Bizen daikai, which fits very nicely into that shifuku. And the lid fit perfectly on Marie's work. Then a chashaku, usually it's bamboo. I chose ume no ki, Japanese apricot. There's a crescent moon on the scoop. And then a quick glimpse into the shrine that I've mentioned so often of Go-O Jinja. When I was in Japan for the first time, my roommate took photographs and I just looked. Again, I was not into photography at the time, just looking. And when we got back to New York, I organized the slides and the pictures, and I couldn't identify this. Everything else I could. This was not seen like this. This is a giant, giant enma for the year of the wild boar last year. Little did we know. And Holunsai is a major sponsor of this shrine, which is west of the capital of Gosho. It's on Karasuma Dori, sort of protects the west side. That's a very, very long story. And that giant enma is not usually there, but this shrine is dedicated to boars. And somewhat difficult to read in the picture, but those are boars on those stone blocks there. It's a little bit difficult to see them. And Hounsai is a boar. And so this has a lot to do with it. And as I was, when I was living in Japan, several years later, after visiting for Expo 70, I was walking up Karasuma and I turned to my left, the pig shrine. We knew the picture only as the pig shrine. And eventually I met Hounsai, Iamoto Daisosho. And when I was giving a memorial tea for my parents, I asked the Takemura-san of Gosho no En, the tea shop, who is just a few blocks south of this shrine, if he would make a special tea for me for the memorial service for my parents. He did, and then he said, why don't you give it a name? And so I gave it the name Go-O no Mukashi, which is the tea I'm drinking today. And it's the top of their menu, as they call it, in honor of this shrine, the pig shrine, and of Hounsai, my great, great benefactor. So the chawan is, has Shinto aspects of the shimenawa with the hanging threads, and the whirlpool, so to speak, I guess, of the mountains, the standing salt, the tate shio in front of the shrine. But the form of the bowl is Otafuku's face, mask. Going on to the whisk, well, once I realized that the sensu, one part was 8/10 of the other part, I started measuring everything in sight, and lo and behold, the chasen is 3 sun kujira, that's kujira on the right, and kane on the left. It's the same measurement, but in different measures, the thread. In and yo, they relate to each other 8-10. Unbelievable. Moving on to the Hisaku. This was major revelation. We saw when we're first taught to hold the Hisaku like a mirror, not of your face, but of your heart, your spirit, your heart. Well, the most important symbol of Amaterasu Omikami, the sun goddess, is the mirror. Well, the cup measured Isun Hachibu diameter, kujira. In that mirror, they come in different sizes. That mirror is Isun Hachibu Kane. They relate to each other 8-10. Moving down to the next picture. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Hisaku handle, 8-10. Moving on, before I burst into tears, to a Nitsu Torii. I made this with the help of Stephen Murphy for my Futaoki, Isun Hachibu. The approach to a Shintō shrine is called the Sando, the 3-way. And one of the masters of Urasenke created a Mitsu Torii. Just as a reminder about incense, and people are wondering, where are the holidays? Well, yes, moving on to the Hoya Koro. The first thing that is an offering in Buddhism is ko. Ko ge to. Ko, incense, ge, hana, flowers, to, candlelight. And so when we put out the futaoki, whether it's a Hoyogoro futaoki or not, it is incense. That's why we bow. Kensui. Mage mono, very Shinto. Mage. Lacquer seems to be Buddhist. Plain wood seems to be Shinto. I know that's a great, vast generalization. But the futaoki is Isun Hachibu Kane. Today, I knew that the measurement of the diameter of the kensui was go sun kane. It's Isun Hachibu Kujira. Our Mizutsugi seems to be a mystery of who created it. Looks like water, doesn't it? And the tsumami, again, kiku, chrysanthemum. The sweets are on an incense tray. I thought, oh, that'll be great for higashi. And lo and behold, it is higashi. The chawan contains sand from the beach of Itsukushima Jinja. I got this when I was visiting there as a souvenir. And the spots are made, those are the sand grains from the beach. And just some fun bowls. Otafuku is my Uchi no Kamisama, my house goddess. And here she is in a chawan, that's the big one. Well, it's chawan size. And then a yunomi, which is for hot water and such. And that's one of her companions. She has several. And that's hyotoko. And he's a sake cup. I thought I'd throw him in for fun. He's puckered up because he is otoko. He is the fireman. And he blows a bamboo tube to make the fire go. And then on to some small, these are just two examples of my collection of Oni wa soto fuku wa uchi, sake cups, the demon on the outside. That's the demon of winter. He's not bad. He's just wild and fierce, like a storm. We're supposedly getting a nor'easter here in Boston soon. And Otafuku's on the inside, and that is related to the Setsubun festival of separation of spring and winter. She is spring and he is winter. And then the kitchen god, people would go to a shrine, Shintō shrine, and they would get a figure such as this. This is Hotei. He is Chinese, but the Japanese have adopted him mightily. And you get a brand new one painted. He's been in a fire, a sacred fire, and take him home and put him in your kitchen to help prevent fires. He's got a treasure bag and a fan. What's that fan for? Well, the fan is an army fan, and it's called a gunbai. Gunbai, yes. And it has the sun and the moon on it, or some other mottos. But he's got it there, brings good fortune. But when he's covered with paint, a lot of his detail is missing, and he's got the sweetest smile. Usually he is standing and dragging his bag, and you want 7, 11, or 13 to put above your stove in graduating sizes. Hotei. He is also pictured in the 10th picture of the 10 ox pictures. He's carrying a sake gourd to get some sake at the market and talking to a little boy who has gone to town after he found his ox. And our next lecture is going to be on muyo, or designs. And this is a hint at the design elements that I will be looking at for next time, which will be the last in our series. And I'm sure I'll get off track there too. But beautiful, really gorgeous, and may have some relationship to the Tokugawa because of the crest, the mon. It's a nice contrast. So I'm sure that I've come to the end of my time. So Anthony, if you'll join with others and bring questions, and also to make tea. I'm going to have a sweet, and also I want to take a tour too. So we'll see if we have any time.
Hi, Allan Sensei. Thank you very much for the wonderful lecture. Do you want to start with questions, or the tour, or tea?
Well, how much of our 108 minutes do we have left?
I think we have about 15 minutes left.
Oh, good, good. Well, let's take a quick tour, because people have been looking at the tea room and looking at me, but I think it might be interesting for them to see my apartment.
Okay.
I wanted to see where we were going. Yes, and here's a little display of the Suzu and its cord, and the extraordinary. There's Uba and Joe. Oh, I was to keep this attached. There's Joe. Wonderful piece. And there's the incense on the leaf. And this is going into the other part of my apartment, the sort of mizuya. Now, this is where we prepare. It's usually much more cluttered. And there's a picture of Shiotsuki sensei guarding us. And this is toward the kitchen with a wonderful pass-through, which is so useful in Chaji. This is a tiny apartment. This is the hallway leading to the shrine. Well, this is the Butsudan, and the shrine is up there. And that's another Ame no Uzume no Mikoto dancing, and that shrine is from Ise. And a rather large Suzu. I'll try to move somewhat so you don't get dizzy. I can't get another book because it's full. And here are the sweets ready for usucha and hallway, and then into the chubo, the kitchen. This is usually a little more busy, but this is the overwhelming collection of Francoma and the sink. Everybody needs a sink. And the Mizutsuba. And a few things here. There's Ame no Uzume no Mikoto as a waitress. And the tea that's being served. Yes, you can switch that off, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you. And if people want to join in on video for tea and Q&A, you're welcome to do so. So we have some questions. One, I guess, comes from me. I should actually not admit that, but the sensu. I love all the 10 to 8 things, Sensei. And this, you showed one example of the sensu. Did you go and measure all of your sensus?
Yeah, well, of course, well, not all of them because I have many fans, but yes, including the first one from Dazaifu Hachiman. Yes.
Great.
Unbelievable. I mean, I measure everything, but I was measuring, well, what the thing was, not the parts. For years, I was wondering this. I was wondering about this. It's 14 sun, that we know. And I was trying to find, well, is this 8? Is this 10? It isn't, but it is. If you take the unit of 10 and 8 of it is the other part. So it's rather the way we write 8/10, 8 and 10. And this is 8, although it isn't. Right, it's 5 point, well, each one is slightly different, but from here to the end of the handle in the cup, that's the 10, and this is the 8 of that. They, artists, craftsmen, they must know that. Do they? Are we? I mean, they're probably, well, I don't know what they're using, but they're probably using centimeters. That has no meaning whatsoever. Makes it a measurement. But if they're measuring 14 sun, they must be using some shaku to get the 14 sun, unless they now know it's whatever it is, 23 centimeters or whatever it is. I forget that. I am not good with numbers. I count on my fingers. So for me to be finding out the magic of relationship, to me, is just absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, it really is. Another question: after seeing the incense dogu, you called the stick or the poke. It had two pointed sides, uguisu.
That's called the uguis. In
Um,
tobacco, they say this comes from incense, that arch, like a croquet arch, right? Originally, it's long and they jab it into the floor. Why it's called an uguis, I have no idea. So
okay.
we can have incense people. I've asked some important to me questions to incense people. They turn away because they're often questions that they have no idea that there was a question there.
Mhm. So the name is related between the two utensils, right? But
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
why it's called that in general, or
Uguis.
to begin with, is not known, right?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But don't get me off on uguis because they are unbelievably extraordinary birds, like most birds are. But the uguis, I'm going off, the uguis is about that big, a bush warbler. And you can hear him. I was at the Torii in Ise, sorry, Torii in Itsukushima Jinja, it starts with E. And there was an uguis singing in the mountains. It wasn't miles away, but it was audible. The sound carries.
Uh, and Sensei, another question. Any
Yes.
specific link with the Fukuro Dana and the theme of Shinto today?
Well, in my mind, it is Rikyu. Rikyu took objects. He took the Shinodana, Shino himself. Shino was the incense master to Rikyu. So I'm sure they worked together on some things. But the Shinodana, I think, existed before Shino took it over. I don't know. But Rikyu took what we now call the Rikyu Marujoku, which has two posts with the round top shelf and bottom shelf. That was used in incense, but he took it and redesigned it somewhat and had it plain wood. So this plain wood, to me, evokes Shinto. And also, the reason that I got the Fukurodana is because of my obsession with otafuku. It's a different fuku, but fuku. Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi. Also, it's magnificent. It's an extraordinary work of art.
And the note from Christy Sensei was the name Ugoisu comes from the sound the utensil makes when being pushed into the tatami.
I love it. Good, Christy.
And maybe we can have some tea.
Good. I will go and just get the hot water from, yeah, let me just do that. I can hear you and you can hear me. One of the reasons that I picked this bowl is because of Oribe. Oribe changed tea so much, the look of tea. And Oribe's style seems to put the ornamentation on the side that faces the guest. So Anthony, are you ready?
I'm muted, but I am ready. Yes.
Good. Go shobani tashimasu. Now that kama is sitting on 6 little pieces of charcoal, maybe a little bit bigger than my thumb. The kama was filled with hot water, probably simmering. It was making matsukaze sound. And that's hot water. So those giant pieces of charcoal that we use, length, yes, they should be exactly that. 4 and 2 sun. Kujira for ro, kane for furo. But they don't need to be as big as your arm. Just a thought. This is the outline of Otafuku's face, obviously. And she, well, maybe that's she. Maybe this is another picture of she. But these rings made me wonder, what are those? And then it's really only recently, since I've been preparing this lecture, this talk, maybe those are the sand mounds. So I saw a video of a man at Kamigamo Jinja finishing, putting some sort of final, probably repair touches on it. And he was leaning on it. It was about, I don't know, maybe 4 feet high, something like that. But he was leaning on it, so it's not going to fall down. Those of you who are adventurous, look for it, tate suna, and patting it, and then he's hoeing around it, it was really quite fascinating. But this, most people would think this is the shomen. But the shomen, as you know, is opposite where you drink. So you would obviously drink from that part right there. It's like a gravy boat. So this is not shomen, this is the shomen, because it's opposite the nomikuchi. So oribe likes things on its side. The hiire, and this charcoal is still going. I put it on in here about 15 minutes before we started, and it's warm. And well, this is how you listen to incense. They changed it to this, but this, I'm somewhat reluctant. It has 3 feet, and usually it's 1 foot forward, but not here. So last time, the Mizutsugi had 3 feet. They were stumpy little stubs, but you can balance more readily on 2 feet than on 1. And so when it's 1 foot forward, well, in this case, the 1 foot forward is facing away. So evidently in Oribe, they want you to be the thing that's receiving it rather than pouring it toward deity or whoever. But another one. First day with the ladle, once you got past that, I'll sort of hold this up a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. The Kagami Bishaku. Well, look at my hands. One is a circle and one is straight. So it's in and yo. And this is the in part. This is the yo part because it's bigger. So my in hand, I have it in hand. My in hand is in the supporting the yo, and my yo hand, Sebastian Bach, my yo hand is supporting the in. I'm making this up. This just happened a couple of days ago. I was inconsolable. I need to get out more. No. This is why I do what I do.
Well, thank you.
I can't believe it. Expo 70, that was 50 years ago. The Pig Shrine. Anthony, questions?
Currently, I think that is most of the questions. Hopefully I didn't miss any. I think we're a little over on time now, so
Yeah,
maybe
I can't imagine that happening.
maybe people can join in with their microphones and give a thank you to Allan Sensei. Well, thank you to all of you, but also, yeah, big thanks to Allan Sensei. Arigatou gozaimashita.
ありがとうござい
あり
ました。
がとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.